welcome everybody to another edition of Hot Program. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast, and as always, folks, I am in airplane mode, and I am joined by a man who thinks Jesus Christ, if he existed, would certainly be more reliable than atheist products. A man who absolutely could not recommend atheist products. How you doing today, my one black friend?
I'm okay. I think Jay might have cleaned that up a little for me. I wrote Asus Christ. But yeah, no. Finally got things resolved with my giant monitor, my $800 monitor that broke, just because it was lifted off a desk. But anyway, I'm well. Sold some vehicle parts today that have been sitting in my garage. Talked to my fiance, talked to my brother. My mom's doing okay. She's recovering in the hospital.
Was she she got sick?
She had a knee replacement surgery, and she had a serious infection in her knee that wasn't healing because she's an 87-year-old diabetic. Well, I'm sure she was prayed for, but the hospital bill is probably $100,000.
Wow.
Which her insurance will cover it, probably all but like $500 or $600, and we got her covered for that. So she's not gonna have to worry about that. But that is the power of professionally trained physicians and technicians. That is the power of medical knowledge. At no point did the doctor go down to the river and pull out some red clay, Alabama red clay, spit on it and rub it in her eye or on her wound to heal it. I'm not certain. He said he may have said some sort of incantation for himself. I'm not sure, but that's not what fixed everything. It was those people working very hard, using their minds and their skills to make my mother better. She will thank God, to be sure.
I'm at a point in my life right now where that's not okay to me. But I know that's how people are. We were doing reviewing Rebecca Davis and Sal Cardova talking about the healing of a beauty queen. A young lady went through the windshield of a in a car accident at the age of about 11 or so, and then they did the reconstructive surgery, and she grew up to be a beauty queen. And why God would take an interest in healing this person so that they could win a beauty pageant is a bit mystifying to me. But it really did touch on the fact that there's a certain way in which the Christian perspective trivializes the advances in medicine, right? Because we've gotten to this point where rescuing someone from a car accident, doing reconstructive surgery on their face, doing cosmetic surgery, doing the physical therapy that they needed to go through. All of that has even become mundane. We made a good point that if they rescue people from 800 car accidents by putting them on a gurney, if they mess up the 800 first and the person falls off the gurney, they're going to sue the hospital. That's how we've come to expect them to get this right and get it right every single time. And it just, we overlook all that and we throw our hands up and go, oh, God. And I know that they'll say, God put the doctors in my life and sent them to med school. But that's an awful lot to do. And it just seems like we're just not coming face to face with the progress we've made as people that we deserve credit for as as a species and these people in particular? Go ahead.
Well, so the surgery to install and reinstall after it went off in August, my defibrillator is routine surgery.
Crazy, right?
It's like, nah, you go home.
They're like, we don't even want to keep you here.
Yeah.
We don't even want to keep you here with this.
You don't even have to stay overnight. I'm
You're
like,
not worth the bed.
What? Yeah, you can go home probably. I'm like, huh? The only reason you'll stay is if they do this surgery in the afternoon, late afternoon. Well, so I stayed because my surgery was in the late afternoon. It's so routine. They got it so dialed in. The meds are super good. Like I got put on a new medication this week to help me with the diabetes that makes food virtually unpalatable. I don't know what it's called, but anyway, like it slows down my digestion and I feel bloated and kind of gross. So I'll look good in a year, but my self-esteem will be in the toilet. So there's all sorts of wizardry that they have going on that is the result of legitimate hard work, trial and error, and sacrifice. But it's not sacrificing the Son of God.
Right.
It's sacrificing people's self and maybe their relationships with their own family, that sort of thing, money and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Now, get this. My brother told me this morning, my sister has been taking care of my mother's finances. So she's sending out, I'll pay the electric bill, pay the gas bill. And she discovered that my mother has been paying a lot of money to evangelists. And I said, they know I'm an atheist. My family knows I'm an atheist. God, I said, it's like I said on the podcast, God never keeps a dime. Never keeps a dime. So my fixed income mother is probably sending Jim Baker with his Apocalypse Chow and Kenneth Copeland with his airplane empire money. They don't need the money. Those people
I really appreciate you being candid about your mom, and as you know, I'm candid about my struggles with my mother. And I want to be clear. People don't need to explain their boundaries to me. Like if it's not comfortable for you to have a conversation about your belief or your lack of belief with your mother, your grandmother, your aunt, a friend, a coworker, whatever it is, that's fine. You don't owe me an explanation, right? So don't feel bad. But I do think that story, and I'm sure there are many like it in my family, are examples of the realities of Christian practice. A lot of times we like to say to ourselves, oh, if your religion isn't doing any harm, then I'm fine with it. Now, I don't say that. I literally think that's like saying if your racism isn't doing anything, isn't hurting it, if your homophobia isn't hurting it, like, no, the thing you're describing hurts people. Like, I don't, so, but we do say that, and I think a lot of us mean that, but I think we mean it in a way that feels very shallow to me. A lot of times we mean one of two things. One, if you aren't doing all those bad things out there, right? If you aren't taking people's rights or beating people up or whatever it is, I hear that. And I also hear if your faith isn't bothering me enough, right? Like if you're, I'm cool with you being a Christian because the way you Christian, you don't come knock on my door, you don't do anything that bothers me personally.
Very passive,
so go ahead and do your
Christianity.
thing. But these stories bring to life the reality for Christians, which is that their faith demands something of them. One of the things we generalized about cults and religions and all these different groups in the atheist e-conference I was in was researchers started to talk to them about high demand groups, right? And these are high demand groups. And even I think in the case of the sweetest, greatest Christian who really, we can't think of anything that they're doing with their faith that harms us or other people, there's always a cost to them, right? And sometimes we just have to accept that. It's a free country. You want to give your money to an organization that I don't support, then that's your choice, right? But I do think it highlights the reality of what it does cost even just the believer themselves, right? They are asked to support televangelists. They are asked to support their church. They are asked to support mission trips and things like that. And they absolutely feel like they have to, right? Because they feel like you said, God, she will give credit to God for the healing, right? Now they're gonna pay the hospital bill, right? Hospital bill might be, like you said, might be 6 figures. Right.
Mine was.
So they give glory to God, right? And then end up paying out 6 figures for the healing to the doctors. So of course, when the church comes knocking, yeah, didn't Jesus heal you? You got to break God off with a little something, right? Because I mean,
there's the 10 Commandments, and then there's the price list for the healing.
Right. Right.
You receive lots of care for this. Oh, look, we had to the nurse had to change you multiple times.
Right.
We charged you for crying. There's all this, no, that's a real thing. Hospitals have charged because the patient has cried.
Well, it's too much. So at some point, you're interfering with services, right? It's just.
Look, when I was 2021. Yeah, late 2020, 2021, I was extremely sick and I had to get hospitalized. Didn't almost die. When I got to the hospital, I already knew what was wrong. Like, just do this and I'll be fine. But anyway, so I'm there for like 3 days. There was a woman there. First room they put me in, I was in this giant room all by myself. Didn't make sense to me. It was quiet. The staff would come in. It was almost like a break room for them. They would just come in and like hang out. Then they transferred me to another room. This room I was in, this is not a lie. It will sound like I'm lying. This was on a floor with, clearly there were some people going through some rough times on this floor. Unlike the other floor where people had like a broken arm or broken leg, this is where if they had to stay, they stayed. I was just there with them. The guy they put me in a room with was in restraints. And he was constantly asking me for broken glass. Do I have a razor? Anything? Can I get up and let him out of his restraints? The police had come to see him. And he only stopped talking when he fell asleep, which is worse than me. So anyway, it's more talking than I do.
Right.
And down the hall, there was this woman chanting something. Now, to me, it didn't make sense. It was nonsense. But she went on day and night and day. I asked the nurse, I asked the orderlies, is there anything you can do? Can you close her door? Can you give her some comfort or something? Oh, no, she just doesn't stop. Can you close her door? No, we can't close her door because then we don't know if she's going to hurt herself or if someone's going to hurt her. And I'm like, someone is going to hurt her.
Sure one way or the other.
One way or another.
It's funny.
I'm not saying you should stop feeding her.
Right.
Give her a sedative or something. But clearly this woman needed comfort and wasn't getting it. And I said, have the lead nurse, the charge nurse, put a note that I'm not paying for this room. You can put me back upstairs. I'll pay for that. I'm not paying for being down here. I can't sleep because he won't stop talking. And quite honestly, he's probably the most dangerous person in this hospital. And then down the hall, this lady is disturbing the comfort of probably 50 or 60 other people.
Wow.
Because she's not comfortable.
Right.
In some kind of way. I don't know what she needed, and I certainly hope she got it.
Right.
But this was the environment that I was put in. So I guess I have to I did realize, I said to my nurse, like, I know it's hard being here. You do this every day. I'm just here for 2-3 days. And then I go home. It's quiet on my street. You can walk down the middle of my block and people will wave to you if they know who you are. walk down the middle of the street. No one will tell you to get out of the street. You'll hardly ever see a car. It's peaceful here. But yeah, there are those things where my bill for that stay, I forget what it was, like $40,000, like $44,000
Wow.
for just a few days. Oh yeah. Well, it wasn't as much as one when I almost died last year. That was $100,000. And like, y'all gonna have to discount this because they didn't do anything for me but diagnostic tests, and they did bring it down. But my insurance paid most of that. I paid some, they paid the rest. So it's one of those things where, yeah, God isn't. It would be nice if people could. It would be nice if Dr. Bart Ehrman, welcome to the program. It would be nice if people could really see that this isn't the work of a God, this healing that takes place, right? These people are often artisans in what they do. I don't have a nasty scar where they put the defibrillators in. I've had a lot of surgeries and stuff like that. And I make sure that I thank the people in the room before the anesthesiologist knock me out. I let them know that I appreciate them. I understand they're helping me have a better life with what they're doing, and I'm glad they're there. And I see the gratitude on their faces that I can sit there and say that. I don't know how they would. It'd be interesting to know how they would react to someone who's in there praising God for surgery, rather than like me. I'm like the opposite. I'm praising them.
Right.
God doesn't even get honorable mention. I don't even give God like
I like for me. I would imagine. I would imagine they're just used to it. I'm sure it just happens every day. But I'm sure at some level they think it's disappointing. Like more disappointed than not saying anything, right? Like you were all the way in the positive land. Oh, it's really great when somebody recognizes the human endeavor that they're in, and I'm sure they're really appreciative when that's acknowledged. I'm sure they're used to people just not saying anything, or they're just concerned about the practicals. What am I going to do? How's it going to hurt? There's so much going on. But then I'm sure there's just some level of maybe disappointment for some of them when the credit's given to like a deity. But I would also imagine, just to be fair, I think there's probably just as many doctors who love that because they're religious themselves, and that's how they see it. They probably see it as God did put me here to be in the room with you and make sure that a good Christian doctor was here to, overlook your surgery or whatever. So I'm sure there's probably just as many that it feeds into their narrative as it doesn't, and we're just giving our take. I do want to get into the program today. So I think it's an exciting thing to talk about. I don't know where everybody's at with it. I'm sure probably a lot of people have seen it. That's kind of the downfall of the downside of the popularity of some of the streams in our community is. But I thought this was a really interesting idea. I've been really trying to shift the focus in our community. I think that I get a little bit tired of all the conversations about the arguments and the philosophy and the stuff that at the end of the day just points to God isn't real. The biblical story isn't true. That sort of thing. I do think most of us need to be a little bit more bold in living that truth, right? I think it's of it like coming out of the closet. But I think part of the real motivation to do so is that, for me, there's a great deal of immorality wrapped up in religion. And I think for most people at the end of the day, that will be a bigger problem. I got to be honest with you, even in my own journey, right? I got to a point where I was just holding on to the label and holding on to the identity. I saw myself as the, cultural Christian or whatever we'd say these days, where I don't take the doctrine seriously, but I still take the identity seriously. A lot of what changed that for me was Christians behaving badly, starting to think of Christianity putting me in a situation I didn't want to be socially, right? Like, when they did the thing, when they came to my campus, a particular creationist group, and they attacked my advisors and researchers because we provide evidence of evolution, right? This is something that, yeah, remember, like that's crazy, right? I realized in grad school that my research made me the target of a holy war. And I saw it playing out on campus, and I saw the people doing it attacking my advisors and the people who had brought me there, who paid my check, and who I worked with day in and day out. Like attacking the Rob Pennock, my freaking teaching mentor now. Like it just really was all of my mentors. And I was like, nope, I'm out. Right? I don't want to identify with a group that behaves this way. And so I do want to hear this discussion, because part of, I think, what's so powerful, what keeps most Christians in the faith to me, is their predetermination that it's good. God is good all the time. God is love. And so for that reason, they are certain, maybe even more so than they are about the actual nuts and bolts of their faith. They're certain that being a Christian makes them a good person because God is good and blah, da, 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 da. And I think a huge thing that those of us that really want to tear down the walls of the faith are going to have to do is start to focus on, yeah, you know, I got to be honest, I'm convinced with you. I'm convinced that there's no God, or I'm convinced that the faith isn't true. But I'm even more convinced, I'm almost certain that this religion is not a good thing, that this story is not and that starts with the story, right? So that I just wanted to set that up as the preamble, that I do think if you can seriously impinge the character of Jesus in the Bible, when you find yourself in a position that you can seriously have a conversation about your lack of belief or whatever it is with a person, being able to articulate this and get them in there and understand this may actually serve to open people's eyes when they're ready for that point. So that's what I'm hoping to see here, but I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, and go ahead, and I'll let you give your preamble too. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, you may not want to allow the following appropriation of your hard work, the other geneticists and biologists who went before you. Genesis 1:24, and God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature after this kind, cattle and creeping thing, and the beast of the earth after his kind, and it was so." So see, there you go. It's just a simple process that God used for the earth to bring forth animals. So get off my land with your protest sign.
Yes.
They go forward and be satisfied.
Genesis 1:24. A lot of theistic evolutionists do point to that passage, actually. You know, as sort of countering the creation narrative, although it's clearly part of a creation narrative. So yeah, that's a
to me, it's ruined easily by God riding around the sky on the back of his cherubim in the song. As my brother said, well, you know, he made a comment about that when I brought that up. I said, to some degree, it is awesome for God to be roaming around heaven through the clouds on the equivalent of He-Man's battle cat. Yeah, I'll give him that. It's pretty interesting. In keeping with what you said, I had a text exchange that I shared with you, and I'll now share it with the audience as well. I had asked a Christian, what is God's standard? Give me chapter and verse, if you would, please. I'll do my best to respond to each verse. I seem to be focusing on the morally reprehensible behavior of the Bible, behavior in the Bible. What is God's true standard? This is a big ask. Take your time. So that's what I asked. The reply I got, Matthew chapter 22, 36 through 40. This is Jesus speaking, or someone asked Jesus in verse 36, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all of your heart and all of your soul and with all of your mind. This is the greatest. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. To which I replied, Thank you. God can't even do both of those. There's that whole hell business, you know. So yeah, even in their own book, I think they often fail to see its failings. Now, I've listened to this presentation by Bart, Ehrman, and I think it's Derek. I don't think this is the Gnostic informant.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to also encourage our viewers. Let me see if I can pull it up on YouTube. I just want to recommend the Gnostic Informant podcast, which I'm not finished listening to. I've heard part of it. It's freaking fascinating. No, history. I watch a lot of stuff about cars.
All right, let me know. Let me know when you find it.
You know, I'll circle back to it because I don't see it.
Both their links are in the description, so people will be able to find it there.
It says,
Okay.
Revelation chapter 2, that I will take Jezebel and I will throw her on a bed. Okay, so now some translations say hospital bed or sick bed. No, the word is bed, and she doesn't get sick, as in a hospital. Men come and have sex with her. Christ is thrown her on a bed. Men come and have sex with her. We're not told if they are raping her or if she's willing to have sex with them. But Christ says he's going to plague these men and he's going to kill her babies. Christ is going to kill her babies. This is Revelation chapter 2, verse 22.
I want people to let that sink in for a second.
Damn.
It's a horrible scene. This is Christ. This is Christ. And so there, the Christians, the synagogue, the Jewish community is understood to be empowered by Satan. Okay, that's not very ecumenical.
Yeah. Bart D. Ehrman, thank you for joining me again. Does it sound weird when I put your middle initial addressing you?
No,
he's always, he actually, it's kind of how it's always addressed,
sounds
actually.
funny because I write it that way, but it's like Bart D. Ehrman. So Jesus is coming back next Thursday or Friday. I can't remember which day it is, correct?
Well, you'll know when it happens.
You have an upcoming webinar. I hope everybody takes the time to go and sign up. It's not costly and it's going to be informative on a topic that's dear to my heart. One of the last standing places I was within Christianity was eschatology. And it was Jesus said some things, or at least the Gospels say that Jesus said some things. And the book of Revelation, which you recently published a book on. So can you tell us briefly about what this webinar is going to be about?
So the webinar is devoted to the issue of the rapture. The rapture is this idea that you find in fundamentalist and conservative evangelical circles that says that Jesus is coming back, probably soon, to take his followers out of the world. The followers of Jesus will be raptured. They'll be snatched up, which is what rapture means. They'll be snatched up and taken to heaven. So that they don't have to experience the next 7 years. The next 7 years will be a period of tribulation on the earth, horrible suffering. The Antichrist will rise up. There'll be military issues, wars everywhere, natural catastrophes, until after 7 years, even God gets fed up and intervenes and destroys the whole lot of them who have not sided with him. But the followers of Jesus 7 years earlier have taken out, so they don't have to be here for it. My lecture is on the rapture and where this idea came from, because everybody simply assumes that it's in the Bible, probably comes from the book of Revelation, and in fact, it does not. It doesn't come from the book of Revelation, and in fact, it's never in the Bible. That seems counterintuitive to people because they've heard verses from the Bible that sure sound like the rapture to them. And I'll be trying to show why these verses, in fact, are not talking about what they say they're talking about. And it's actually not that hard to prove, but people don't see it, have never been told this before.
You have gone on record saying Jesus failed as an apocalyptic figure. Am I right?
No, I don't think I've said he's failed, but I have said he was wrong.
Okay, so
I don't like to think of Jesus as failure, but Jesus thought that the end was coming in his own generation. He like other apocalypticists, he thought the end was coming in his generation, and no, he was wrong about that. It did not happen then.
So if we take your particularly, it's not just yours, it's a scholarly assessment that Jesus expected the Son of Man, which was not him, to come soon, and the kingdom of God, which was going to be a real, physical, actual kingdom of God on earth, which seems to be depicted in some way. Revelation, this millenarian figure named John on the island of Patmos, seems to have also this idea that God's actual kingdom is going to come to earth. Whether we interpret it that way or through the lens that, well, the Jesus is the one who's going to come and he's the Son of Man, both of those failed. No matter what path you take,
Crystal, I appreciate it.
It fails, unless you're a Gnostic who imagines this in some esoteric spiritual way. But then again, nothing actually happened, right?
The book of Revelation does think it's going to happen soon, and that it did not happen. But there have been, for the course of most of Christian history, biblical scholars and theologians have insisted that Revelation was not predicting that. It's not that they were Gnostics. They weren't Gnostics. But going back to St. Augustine in the 5th century, St. Augustine argued that when the book of Revelation describes the future millennium on earth, where there'd be 1,000-year reign of Christ here on earth, that he was actually talking about what was going to happen when the church took over the Roman world, that the church would reign on earth, that Christ would rule through the church. And during the millennium in the book of Revelation, Satan is bound and is unable to harm anybody. And according to Augustine, Satan cannot hurt anybody in the church because they have the power of God behind them. And so Satan is bound for anyone who believes. And so the interpretation of Revelation that lasted over century after century after century until relatively modern times was not that it's predicting the future. John himself thought he was predicting the future, but not in the way fundamentalists think. But he did think this was going to happen soon, and so he did fail at that. He was wrong about that too. But it's not that Christians have always thought that. Christians typically have thought that it's happening now. The millennium is now.
There's so much thought on this, and of course, I'm sure you're going to cover a lot of this in the webinar. I recently interviewed Robert J. Miles and James Crossley on the book Jesus, A Life in Class Conflict. And we were talking about Revelation in passing and this millenarian idea. I'm throwing out a few names. You know all of these people. Dr. John Dominic Crossan, his approach. And ultimately, what we walked away, and I'd love to get your thoughts on the book of Revelation being written by this guy named John, who is a millenarian. He thinks that it's going to happen soon. Apocalyptic wise, that God's going to come, bring revenge and judgment. But they think that there's some of that. There's still this like continuity to Jesus as a figure in a similar vein. I know that John's writing this later at the end of the 1st century, but that in that same vein, there's some connection. Do you think that while there's big differences, do you think there's some connection? Because you've mentioned in the past that Jesus's teachings were more love the poor and help the poor and stuff. And I know John's not mentioning that. I think he might be traumatized by what happened in 70. But do you think that behind the message of Jesus, it's like, well, God's going to come and make the least the first, or the last first, and the ones on the bottom on top, which means he is still going to destroy and kick the butt of those who are rich, who are being the way they are toward his people. So there's still a butt kicking coming. It's just not as bloody and wrathful as we see in Revelation.
Well, no, that's been my argument about Jesus for as long as I've been a scholar, is that contrary to John Dominic Crossan, who does not think that is what Jesus was all about, I think Jesus was an apocalyptic prophet. He thought that the end of the world was coming soon, that God was soon to intervene. He was going to destroy everything and everybody opposed to him, and bring in a kingdom where those who lived righteously would be rewarded.
I just want to pause here for a second, because at some level, I gotta admit, it hurts me that we're not more obvious about what this says about atheists.
What the Bible says about atheists?
Yes. It's not a term. It's not a term used in the Bible, right? They were not walking around having this word for atheist. But that's what they're describing, right? When they're describing people that are enemies of God, don't follow him, don't believe in his word, don't da-da-da-da-da-da. And there's no interpretation of the Bible in which the fate of those who don't follow God is not seriously fucked up, or at least seriously set apart from Christians. I got actually in a very frustrating the other day because I mentioned this as a form of racism, and I had a bunch of fucking people who I don't think have ever experienced racism try to tell me that it's not. Which is a whole nother conversation, but I think it's really problematic because there is no interpretation of the Bible in which this is not the case. And I really wish that atheists understood the Bible hates you. The Bible hates you.
The Bible's a book. It's a book.
Okay, but it's a book, but the book is an act of hate speech, right? We wouldn't find Mein Kampf. Oh, it's just a book. Look, if we find where Hitler wrote out, and Mein Kampf is not that, he wrote that way earlier. But let's say we find his manifesto of what the Holocaust is really all about. It's going to be in a book, right? But I just think that is the cultural context, right? The cultural context is the same way these people had serious problems with homosexuals, the way these people are seriously misogynist, they're seriously bigoted against people who are non-believers. Matter of fact, I would argue it's the prime bigotry. Now, I'm sorry, and I mean that. It bothers me sincerely that this is the case. Mm-hmm. But I don't see any escaping it, and I don't see any dignity in looking the other way. This is why I say we have to come out of the closet. The same way the LGBTQ community said, you know what, I could just pretend to be the gender I was assigned at birth and go along and get along. Oh, I could ask one of my lady friends to come home for Thanksgiving with me, so mom thinks I have a girlfriend and can just assume I'm straight. But that wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be right. One, because it's not true, and two, why is it okay to hide who I am because this group is prejudiced against me? This group needs to confront its prejudice. Mm-hmm. And if you can't do that, then again, you've forfeited your seat at the big kids table. It really bothers me that atheists are not ready to be honest about what the Bible says about non-believers. Because trust me, every believer knows. They might not be able to cite you chapter and verse, right? But what is the whole conversation we have about why it's so difficult to get these people to let go of their faith? I'm gonna draw the conclusion for you. It's because it's not okay to be an atheist.
In their eyes.
It's because the one thing it is definitely not okay to be in this world is a non-believer. That is discrimination, gang. That is bigotry. Oh God, I'll do anything, but please don't try. So look, we gonna let the tape roll, but I just think Bart put it so clearly. That's what the book said. They expect, whether it's a celestial kingdom of heaven, as most people interpreted it now, in which atheists are excluded from eternal life, or it's what Bart, one of the leading scholars in this field, is trying to tell us is what the Bible is actually saying. Oh no, it was actually much worse than that. What it's really saying is, oh no, God's gonna come and reign here. Oh yeah, and he's gonna politely take all his favorite people, boop, get them out of this whole mess, leave the rest of y'all here to fight amongst yourself and bring war and disease and famine and conflict and all of that, which really, I don't know why we're even doing that, because ultimately God's going to destroy you all. But no, he's going to let you fight it out amongst yourselves for damn near a decade for his amusement, right? And then he's going to wipe everybody off the surface of the planet. Now,
wipe away every tear. Yeah.
Now, you might think you can coexist and co-govern, and why can't we all just get along with people who believe this? But I refuse to. I absolutely refuse to. So that's me. Go ahead, my one black friend.
Okay. So, as many of you may have heard me say before, I do disagree with when they're saying the books of the Bible, the New Testament, were written. Old Testament, I don't really have a foundation to say one way or another or an opinion about a lot of that stuff. I think most of it was written when they were in Babylon or just after, most of it. But when the Hebrews were in Babylon. As far as Revelation goes, forgive my roommate making a shake.
All good.
As far as Revelation goes, I do think Revelation was written prior to all the Gospels, with the exception of maybe John. But actually, no, I take that back. Even before that, because a lot of what Jesus and his pals are saying is going to happen, those things are in Revelation. It doesn't need to come after. And people say after the temple. Derek just said it, right? This was after the temple. Maybe John is sort of reflecting on the destruction of the temple as this is being written. And I say no, because the book of Zechariah talks about the temple is going to be, Jerusalem is going to be torn down.
Yeah, I want to see if
Revelation says the same thing. Jerusalem is going to be destroyed, and there's going to be a new Jerusalem. In the way I see it, there's no need for the Gospels to be written after Revelation when what the people in the Gospels are discussing takes place in Revelation. So from my point of view, Jesus and his disciples are just doing live action role play. I mean, when Jesus tells you that he's going to divide father and son, brother and
so you think he's playing out he's playing out the role in Revelation?
First of all, I think it's fiction, and to me, the Gospels read like homework. They read like somebody's homework,
right?
Various people's homework with the same assignment from the same teacher. They don't. I guess I don't see them as broadly different as somebody else might. I used to write, right? I started creative writing club when I was in middle school. So, I actively was trying to be a writer for a career.
Yeah.
So I pay attention to forms. No, I don't see everything. And maybe someone does, but certainly not me.
Well, I think Bart does too. I was just gonna say, I think I want to have if I can. After I'm done with this grant, I'm gonna try to do more with more scholars, and I'd love to for you to have the conversation with Bart Ehrman. I don't think it's gonna hold. I don't think it's gonna hold up. I just think they'd know. No, I think the scholars would know by now if Revelation was written earlier, but I'd certainly like to hear what he has to say about the idea.
You and I could argue about that. Why would they know?
I don't know. I don't have any idea. I don't know.
The consensus used to be all this stuff was written 16 minutes after the crucifixion or while it was happening. I think it's in Matthew where it says they had a scribe with them. So who's taking this down? Who's writing all this stuff down? So there are things put into the account that would make the accounts.
No. I'm saying your argument makes sense. I'm just saying I don't know. I don't even know how to evaluate it. That's why you have to talk to Bart or somebody about it.
I think my position is fringe. I think it's fringe. It doesn't mean that somebody smarter than me couldn't come along and say, you know what? Let me show you why he's right. Because like I said, I started work on my giant Excel spreadsheet, which is referencing the book of Jubilees. It's referencing Maccabees. It's referencing all these other works, plus things in the Bible where I'm pointing out, here's what, Jesus is essentially following a script that was written with lines from various other places. It's not, it doesn't have to be prophecy. It could just be what the cult needed to see to watch the end of the world come.
Yeah.
In Maccabees, the woman talks about she'll see her kids in the resurrection.
It could be, but we've got to weigh that against the evidence. That's all. All right, let's keep moving because we're not going to settle this, and I'm not honestly.
No, we're not going to settle it.
I honestly don't care. if it was Revelation was written first.
With the Book of Revelation is not whether it has an apocalyptic view. I mean, obviously, a book called The Apocalypse is going to have an apocalyptic view, and in the apocalyptic Jesus had an apocalyptic view, so they have apocalyptic views, but the way they work out their apocalyptic views are radically different from each other. In Jesus' apocalyptic view, for one thing, when God destroys his enemies, he's not going to torture them. He destroys them. In the book of Revelation, God destroys people after torturing them.
Sorry, there was something I forgot, and it was Crystal's comment, which I love, which is from Deuteronomy 6-10. Show them no pity, do not spare them or shield them. You must certainly put them to death. Your hand must be the first in putting them to death, and then the hands of all the people. Now, I obviously know Christians don't believe that that's what they should be doing, but
some do.
The fact that that's in the book is enough for me. The fact that it's in the book is enough for me. Terrible.
And so that's, I don't think Jesus thought that at all. There's nowhere in the Gospels. There's nowhere when
Assembly
Jesus
God is with you, my one black friend.
That's coming. It's an annihilation. And John in the book of Revelation makes clear that it's not an annihilation. At one point, one of the catastrophes that hits the earth is that these locusts come out of a pit that spread all over the earth, and they have the power to inflict pain. They sting everybody except for the followers of Jesus. They sting everybody, and these people are in excruciating pain for 5 months and are not allowed to die. And so there's nothing they can do about it. And that's one of the punishments that God sends, that Christ sends in the book of Revelation. And, that is just not Jesus of the Gospels. Jesus of the Gospels he's not into the torture and into the prolonged agony. And so there's that difference. And the other difference is that the book of Revelation maintains that there's only a tiny slice of people that are going to survive this coming onslaught. It's not even all Christians. There are a lot of Christians who are going to be wiped out with everyone else and thrown into alive. They'll be thrown alive into a lake of burning sulfur. That's how they're going to be destroyed. But including a lot of Christians. And it depends precisely that you believe precisely the right things about Jesus, and you do precisely the right things about Jesus, which are the things that John himself believes and does. You do those things, you'll survive. Otherwise, it's off to the lake of fire. And that's not at all what Jesus taught. Jesus taught that, in fact, what matters before God is that you help those who are in need. Those who are poor, those who are hungry, those who are homeless. You take care of them, and God will welcome you into his kingdom. You don't, then you're going to be fried.
It's almost like John is obsessed with the idea of just separating yourself from Rome, really, in the participation in Rome. That is the achievement of not getting destroyed. He's so obsessed and angry, and this is me reading into it, but I imagine PTSD or some hatred toward what they did to the Jews in 70. And Elaine Pagels wrote about this in her book on Revelation. Kind of wanted to get your comments on where, here's Rome, a male in this figurine. There's some gender studies that can be done on this.
You said Assembly said apologists are going crazy right now over what Bart said. You're going to be fried. I would love to see that. That's awesome.
Well, let me, how do I see the chat? I don't see the chat, or I won't, unless, because I'm in Gather. I don't know.
No, you have to be on YouTube. You'll see it on YouTube.
All right, that's already too much for me. But yeah, I find all this extremely interesting. Please continue.
Oh, okay.
Where there's a rape act on each nation with a blade to the throat of the woman, which represented the Jews. And so here's this man saying, God, how long? No, you're going to come in and I know what's going to happen. So the message isn't so much of like a conflict of treating poor people or people who are hungry or things like that. It's more like segregate or separate yourself from what Rome is doing, and that Rome is the bad guy in the whole picture. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I agree. I agree that Rome is the problem for the book of Revelation. I think it's quite clear. One of the things I do in my book on Armageddon is try to show how we know that, because for anybody who knows what to look for, historical scholars, this is just common.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm glad Professor Ehrman is telling us it's in his book, because I utterly disagree that they're talking about Rome. Because later in Revelation, oh, absolutely. Later in Revelation, there's this, they're screaming out, Babylon has fallen, Babylon has fallen. Hold on one second. Jesus even says something. Hold on a second. The Queen of the South. Queen of the South will rise up. Okay, Matthew 12:42. Let's go there. You don't have to pull it up, Pocket Locker. I'm just trying to find the Bible Gateway version because it's just the easiest for me to look at. This is, for me, when I see stuff like this, it kind of makes me think that for sure they were pulling from something else for a lot of this, because this is almost like an artifact that got left in there because somebody didn't clean it up. This is Matthew chapter 12, 41 to 30, 43. The men of Nineveh shall rise in the judgment with this generation and shall condemn it, because they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, a greater than Jonah is here. The queen of the south shall rise up in the judgment with this generation and shall condemn it, for she came from the uttermost parts of the earth to hear wisdom of Solomon, and behold, a greater than Solomon is here. So get this. So I'll leave out 43. So what he's saying, he's talking about Nineveh. Pull up a map, or just, Jay, go on your screen and in a Google search and say, where is ancient Nineveh? Pull that up. If you could throw it on a map, like, where is ancient Nineveh? So the queen of the south is going to rise up in judgment. How many centuries has this woman been dead? The Queen of Sheba. How long has she been dead at the point where Jesus is saying this?
I don't know.
A few. Or several, if I'm being even more vague. So can you find it in text, where it says in text, like it was this city or this city?
It's Mosul now.
Okay, and what country is that in or near?
Iraq.
Oh, and Iraq is what?
It's in northern Iraq.
Is Babylon.
Okay.
They're talking. I know people, like I said, I got to read what Dr. Ehrman has written in order to.
Yeah, I honestly don't want to do this. I don't know this well enough. I don't know,
Okay.
and
Right.
we're here to review Bart Ehrman's video. I don't want to get side. I don't know how to evaluate these claims. My thinking is it's gonna take a lot to convince me that Bart Ehrman doesn't know whether or not the book is talking about Rome. To me, this is I honestly don't really trust anybody's interpretation of the Bible without like some serious scholarship. And bigger problem is I hate it. I really hate the book. I genuinely don't care.
When he talks about the beast from the sea, that is referred to by many people call him the Antichrist. The term Antichrist does not appear in the book of Revelation, but this is the figure they call the Antichrist figure. It's quite clear this is the Roman emperor, and the enemy is the city of Rome. The whore of Babylon in chapter,
assembly is with you. The assembly of God is in
chapter
17. The whore of Babylon.
I literally don't know. I haven't read this stuff in decades, right?
Okay.
666 is a reference to the Roman Emperor Nero. This can be shown from the text itself. And so I do that, all that in my book.
Hang on. This is what he's talking about. Let me go back a few because I was talking
to
on.
Look for it.
Isn't so much of like a conflict of treating poor people or people who are hungry or things like that. It's more like segregate or separate yourself from what Rome is doing, and that Rome is the bad guy in the whole picture. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I agree. I agree that Rome is the problem for the book of Revelation. I think it's quite clear. One of the things I do in my book on Armageddon is try to show how we know that, because for anybody who knows what to look for, historical scholars, this is just commonplace. When he talks about the beast from the sea that is referred to by many people call him the Antichrist. The term Antichrist does not appear in the book of Revelation, but this is the figure they call the Antichrist figure. It's quite clear this is the Roman emperor, and the enemy is the city of Rome. The whore of Babylon in chapter in chapter 17, the whore of Babylon is Rome, and that can be demonstrated from the text itself. 666 is a reference to the Roman Emperor Nero. This can be shown from the text itself. And so I do all that in my book. The one thing I disagree with
is he selling you this book?
I don't.
He's selling us this damn book. It sounds like this book. We need to read this book. Yeah, I don't read books. But no, this sounds good. This sounds like he's one people are really going to be talking about.
I don't think that I don't know that this author was Jewish. I don't know
there's
that
an audiobook.
And I don't know that the destruction of the temple per se is caused him a lot of anxiety. He clearly thinks Rome is the problem, but it's not the Roman treatment of Jews that's the problem. It's Roman treatment of Christians, who whether they're Jewish or not. And so that's in this book, it presupposes that the vast majority of the followers of Jesus are non-Jewish. And so I don't know whether he was Jewish or not, frankly, but definitely Rome is the enemy.
Now, what do we do with Paul, right? We talk about Paul. In some ways, you see it contradict Jesus, of course, in his letters versus what we find in the Gospels. But Paul's view of what is the parousia, you also find this language in Revelation of this kind of parousia, the coming of the Lord. And it seems like this author is aware of the Sibylline oracles. At least I've seen Nero Redivivus play its role in some of the Sibylline oracles as we see it in Revelation. So I'm kind of wondering, what does Paul contradict this guy, John? I mean, Elaine Pagels, I think, tried to make a point that she even thought maybe there's a jab at Paul in like the second angel to the church, where there's this idea of like meat sacrificed to idols. And anyway, like, I don't know where you fall on some of these details, but what are your thoughts about John and Paul? Do they contradict in their views of the end?
They're broadly very similar, that there's Jesus is coming back to destroy his enemies and will bring in a kingdom. So they're broadly similar in many ways.
All right, Neil, Gnostic Informant, just sent me his video about Christians don't understand Revelation with Bart Ehrman. So I guess we'll have to do that one later. It's going to be a crazy day. I got a lot going on. But I think I'll probably do that one this week or something as a follow-up. But look forward to that.
Okay.
I disagree with Elaine on this point. I don't think that Paul is the target.
Also, shout out to Neil. I guess that means he's watching somewhere in YouTube land. I don't know what's going on.
The one point where they do overlap, they overlap in a number of points, but the one point has to do with food offered to idols, whether it's appropriate to eat it or not. Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians chapters 8 and 10, and he thinks basically, you should not eat the meat. He talks about the pluses and minuses basically and says, yeah, but in the end, don't do it. John has a very decided view that anyone who is a follower of Jesus who eats meat that has been previously offered to an idol has committed a sin that will be punished horribly. God will destroy this person. His most vivid image of this is in his discussion. It's not of a Paul figure. It's a woman prophetess in the city of Thyatira that, so it's a woman, and she's active in a particular church that Paul's never been associated with, Thyatira. And John calls her Jezebel. Jezebel is the name of a wicked queen who really was bad news for Israel in the Old Testament. And this woman is bad news for the Christians, according to John, because she thinks it's okay, John says, to eat the meat, as did some people in Corinth when Paul was writing them. It's okay to eat the meat. And the background of this, if you don't mind, I take a second on this because it's a really important passage.
I love it because it sounds
the background
weird
of this
Bart.
is that in the ancient world, you didn't have butchers who were just kind of setting up shop. Most people didn't eat meat a lot because it was expensive. But if you did eat meat, usually, almost always, it was meat that had been sacrificed in the temple. You've got a family party, or you got a block party, or something, got a neighbor party, you got a city party, and you go to the temple and you're going to have some meat, and you sacrifice the animal to one of the gods. And the meat, then the priests slaughter the animal and they butcher it and they skin it, and they burn the skin and the bones and the fat to the gods or to the god. And then the meat gets, taken for the people to eat, and whatever is left over, the priests sell. And so if you're going to eat meat in the ancient world, you're buying temple meat. And so Christians wondered, is that okay? Because it's been offered to a god. And some are saying, we get more of this in Corinth, but in 1 Corinthians, but some are saying, well, yeah, it's okay to eat. Look, these gods don't exist. You're not really sacrificing to a god. If there's no God there, you can't eat meat offered to a god if there's no God. And so it's okay. They're just they're mistaken about this. And other people saying, no. This is participating in pagan worship. You can't do it. And Paul weighs in and says, yeah, okay, don't do it. But John weighs in and says, oh my God, if you do this. So Jezebel is saying it's okay to do. We don't know what she was saying. To put a good read on it, she might be saying, look, your neighbors invite you over for a meal and they're not Christian. You're Christian. Go to the meal, eat their meal. They serve you meat, eat the meat. It'll give you a chance to talk to them about Jesus. You can spread the word. Maybe they'll get more interested. You can invite them to the church. And, she may be saying something like that. But John thinks that she's the spawn of Satan for allowing people to eat meat offered to idols. And he said, this is in one of the letters that Christ dictates.
So this idea is you shouldn't eat meat if it's used in the rituals of other religions. Is that your take on this, Mama Black Friend?
Yes, that's what they're saying. But you have I think there's some conflict here because there's the rise in eat vision that Peter has. Hold on, I open up my notes with this computer. I'm using an Asus computer.
All right, let us know if Asus Christ comes through for you.
No.
To John that he sends to this church in Thyatira, where Christ says that this Jezebel has urged people to worship idols and to commit fornication. In Jewish thinking and then Christian thinking after it, idolatry was always connected with sexual sins.
All right. I'm just going to speak on this because it is bugging me. And gang, y'all know me. I'm going to hammer these messages home because I promised for 2023, this was the year I am pushing the button. It is the year we're just going to get real about religion. What this highlights for me, but they're having a wonderful conversation. But what this highlights for me is how serious this stuff was taken in these communities. Mm-hmm. That there's this whole discourse, but literally the tone of religion, and modern Christians need to be honest about this, as do modern Jews and people from any faith, is that they think it's a legitimate conversation to talk about. Can we share a meal after it is offered or consecrated to various religions? Man, if you consecrated that meat in the name of Baal, oh yeah, I can't break bread with you. What do you mean you can't break bread with them? No, you should break bread with them. this is what I mean about really understanding how deep the bigotry is. Because now I'm sure you'd find a bunch of these people who would pat themselves on the back for sharing a meal with each other. Oh, look at this. We just had a fucking meeting of the village people, man. We just had a Jew, a Christian, a Muslim, and a Buddhist all sit down for some Taco Bell together. Aren't we just the beacon of tolerance? And it's like, well, one, held to the knob because your books actually basically say you shouldn't. And why is this something you're congratulating yourself for? Because it's clearly overcoming the morality that's actually described in the sacred text. In other words, you're only giving yourself a pat on the back because you're not doing it the way your religion would have you do it. And it's just so weird. Like, why do people want to even hang on to belief in a book that literally even has an internal conflict about whether or not it's okay to share meat with people who make offerings to different deities? Just
For some reason.
child's play.
So he says that Jezebel's doing this, and Christ
Jezebel was
says
progressive.
in
Facts.
Revelation chapter 2 that I will take
Funny how
Jezebel
growing up
and I will
changes your
throw her
perspective.
on a bed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now some translations say hospital bed or sick bed. No, the word is bed, and she doesn't get sick as in a hospital. Men come and have sex with her.
Yep.
Christ is thrown her on a bed. Men come and have sex with her. We're not told if they are raping her or if she's willing to have sex with them. But Christ says he's going to plague these men and he's going to kill her babies. Christ is going to kill her babies. This is Revelation chapter 2, verse 22. So that the outcome is very similar to Paul's. Don't.
And thanks
Here,
to
here.
the prop master YouTube punk, I will be reading from the NRSV Book of Myron, Most High Apostle Super Studded Edition. And yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. What did he say, John? Revelation 20, chapter 2, verse 2, chapter 20, verse 2, I think. No, I lied. It's not the right passage. What's the right passage, Bart?
This is Revelation chapter 2, verse 22.
Oh, 2, verse 22. I knew that. I didn't totally whiff on that. All right. Oh, I'm in come on now. Flip back to Revelation is not that long of a book. People don't realize that. All right, here we go. Revelation 2:22, next page. It says, beware, I am throwing her on a bed, and those who commit adultery with her I am throwing into great distress, unless they repent of her doings, and I will strike her children dead. And all the churches will know that I am the one who searches minds and hearts, and I will give each of you as your works deserve. Woo, searches hearts and minds. Yep, that's that thought policing right there.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So again, he thinks this is Rome. I still say it's Babylon.
But what if they're using one as a stand-in for the other? I don't know. But yeah, I'm gonna try to set it up so you can actually have this conversation with Bart Ehrman.
Well, Revelation itself says that Jerusalem is called Sodom and Egypt, spiritually, right? Spiritually. So is it they were never in Egypt at all? They were in Jerusalem? You know, again, I think a lot of this Old Testament stuff's written during the captivity. That's all. But anyway, yeah, so maybe Jezebel is different than the whore of Babylon altogether. But again, as I mentioned with the Queen of the South, there are artifacts here. And I think Revelation is probably very old maybe hundreds of years before the rest of the gospel. And again, they're just LARPing. They're just live action role play, thinking they are the group that is going to bring it all together. And as I mentioned in earlier episodes of our podcast here, I think it all
Yeah,
started.
I'm starting to not even think these are mutually exclusive hypotheses, right? Like, because if you have this earlier text and then that's what we think they're doing anyway, right? Like, we think a lot of the Jesus story is people later taking a story about something that is from a different time and, trying to make it fit their context. And if those people did that, then it would be a situation where they use some tale inspired by, something that happened in a previous time in a different place in the world and, play it out as though it refers to them. And then the text we get has it re-encoded as though it was about the empire of their time and their context. So I'm not, I just want to make sure we get through this, but
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting theory. It's just, like anything else, we try to vet it out with the right people. It'd be a game changer. And I think the question for Bart would be, how would he respond to that hypothesis? And more interestingly, maybe what type of evidence could there be, or what would you look for to substantiate that hypothesis?
Well, when I'm done doing the write-up, I think that's the only fair time to present it to him, because then it's not me flipping pages. It's me saying, here it is right here. It's not me typing in a search. Here it is right here. Here's chapter and verse. Here's the book I got it out of. Here's why I say that. Like, just looking in my notes, I'm seeing specific things that are referring to maybe the book of Enoch or something like that, where I have to still go into the book of Enoch and remember where I saw it, write down, okay, here it is. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Let me give you.
Well, yeah, you got to get it. Let me.
I gotta do that. I don't think it's fair. Otherwise, it's not fair to him or me. And I just sound like I can't make my case if I can't make my case.
Right. So, well, yeah, get on it, because we're gonna see it, and I'm gonna. I think that'd be great. Let me roll this. I got to talk to Derek. I don't know what it takes to book Bart. Derek. I'm not sure if Derek's paying him or whatever, but we'll see.
We'll just go on Derek's show. Let it be Derek's content. And we just repost it. He seems to get a certain amount of time.
It's not a bad idea. But yeah, I'll talk.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that. It's not adversarial. We just disagree. And he can tell me why. And he's told me he's got this book. I can look at it and see how he makes his case. I need to do the same for him. It's not fair to all those who are interested, right? If I don't. So
the outcome is very similar to Paul's, don't eat the meat, but the view of it is really quite drastically different.
I want people to let that sink in for a second.
It's a horrible scene. This is Christ. This is Christ. And so this is part of my view in my book on Armageddon is that the view of Revelation, the understanding of Jesus in Revelation is not the understanding of Jesus in the Gospels. And I don't think the view of this author, John of Patmos, I don't think his understanding of Christ is Jesus' own understanding of himself or of his gospel.
Can you pause right there?
And there's a mention of Satan's throne.
Can you pause it? Okay, so open up another search window and type in the question, what does Patmos mean? Patmos. As part of my review of all this, my opinion is that John is the first gospel written. And it was written after Revelation. And how I sort of put it together in my mind And again, I would need to prove this, right? I can say, well, here's an idea, it's a hypothesis, or it's just an idea. I don't necessarily think I can prove it. But I would submit that there were these cult centers, and Revelation mentions the 7 churches. Those 7 churches existed prior to what you see take place in the Gospels. And I'm wondering if they didn't even have a name that was called the world. I'm wondering if that was what they were called, the world. Why do I say that? Because there's a lot of references to the world. Here's a big one that we've all heard probably. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, and like whoever shall believe in him will have everlasting life and shall not perish. Well, if there was this cult that is expecting the Messiah and it has several different centers, then it makes sense that the Messiah is coming to that group that is expecting him. John the Baptist could have been in that group, and he is what? He's making the crooked places straight. He's preparing the way. But like I said, I just, I need to give people chapter and verse.
Yeah, it's all right. Also, we're trying to keep track of Bart's argument, right? Which is about is Jesus as depicted in Revelation evil? So I don't think we need to settle the dating to.
Okay, so argument. what does Patmos mean? What did you see? What does it say?
It just talks. It's a Greek island, Greek city,
right?
Greek island in the Aegean Sea.
What's the word Patmos
famous
mean?
For where John of Patmos received the visions found? Oh, I don't know.
It's the Isle of my destruction.
Okay.
It's his destruction. Kind of poetic, even if it's true.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Rome 2, I don't know if you've done any background knowledge on that. What the heck is that about?
In one of these letters that Christ dictates through John to the 7 churches of Asia Minor, he speaks of a church where that are being opposed by the synagogue, which is the throne of Satan, and so there, the Christians, the synagogue, the Jewish community, is understood to be empowered by Satan. Okay, that's not very ecumenical.
Yeah. This fits why you were saying maybe we don't even know what this author, like where, if they're Jewish or not, and it might fit within the trope of what we see happening later at the end of the 1st century, start of the 2nd, with this anti-Jewish or anti-Judaism, I'll say, rhetoric. People use crazy arguments to argue this guy's a Jew, and he may be a Jew. John was a Jewish name, but he's living at the end in the 90s. Peter wasn't a Christian name until Peter came along, and then till Jesus renamed Peter, then people started calling their kids Peter. So I don't know if this is a Christian who's named this person, their child, John, after one of the famous Johns, or whether, I don't know. He's not called John the son of Zebedee. But people use crazy arguments to say, well, he's got to be Jewish. He quotes the Old Testament a lot. He refers to the Old Testament. So he's got to be Jewish, right? Who else would know the Old Testament? And you think, what are you talking about? Have you read anything? These scholars say this. First Clement was written just about the same time. First Clement is written by a Gentile, and the whole thing is about the Old Testament. The idea that only Jews knew the Old Testament, Christians, people who became Christians, who converted, or people who grew up in Christian families by the end of the 1st century, of course they knew the Old Testament. They quote it. And so when Paul writes 1 Corinthians, he's writing to people that he says were pagans. And he has the most complicated interpretations of the Old Testament, and he expects his readers to know what he's talking about. So it's a silly argument to say that if he quotes the Old Testament, he's got to be Jewish. Wow. I have one more question for you, Dr. Ehrman, and that is all the research you've done over the decades, your scholarship, Would you say learning the historical, cultural significance to the context of the material we're reading, the book of Revelation, Paul's letters, the Gospels, whatever it may be, do you think that knowing that historical context played some role in you not believing it literally is true anymore? I mean, another way of phrasing it is, do you think finding out who, what, when, where, how, and why played a role in your deconversion
From Christianity?
Yes, sir.
No, I don't. I have a lot of Christian friends, scholar friends, who would agree with everything I've said today, who are still Christians. I met up with one of my best friends last night, who's a Presbyterian minister, who agrees with everything I would have said just now. And so this kind of information will almost certainly, if you really look into it and buy into it, it will almost certainly lead you away from being a fundamentalist. It will be, and you know, you're going to have trouble staying in the evangelical camp, even as a liberal, although you could do. But there are plenty of Christian scholars who are experts on Revelation. I mean, I think, famous scholars that you know, if you know anything about the book of Revelation and you know who's written about it, say in the last 20 years, New Testament scholars, most of them are Christian, almost all of them. I can't think of anybody who's not a Christian, actually. So,
and this is another dark part of Christianity. And it's right there for everybody to see. To me, it's so obvious that the reason that's the case is because that's the part of Christianity they celebrate. And inside them, they think it's wonderful. They really think that boom, there it is, right in the book. It proves it. You know, Jesus had this view, or this is the holy view, right? We're gonna be good to go. Everybody else is fucked up. Everybody else is not gonna be in God's kingdom. God's gonna, you know, I don't know. It's weird, but I think that's the point for most people. Like when people look you in the face and tell you the God gives them a sense of hope, meaning, and purpose. Hope, meaning, and purpose for what? The answer for most of them is going to be eternal life. Ding, 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 duh. Right? Well, where do they get that notion from, and what do they mean? Right? And whether they're probably not going to kick Revelations to you. They're probably not going to kick Deuteronomy to you. They're probably going to kick more like that John 3:16 to you. For God so loved the world.
Yeah.
You know, but at the end of the day, that's at the heart of it. That's eschatology. That's right. It's whoever believes in him and does the right Christianity is going to be in the kingdom forever, and everybody who doesn't. So the reason that I think a lot of them are not dissuaded from their faith by this view, although it's encouraging to hear that a lot of people are. But I think the reason that a lot of them aren't is because that's the point, and I think that is part of what makes this group clearly bigoted, and it's a clear form of hate group, because it's the exclusion of others is the point of the group. It isn't a side effect of the organization. It's what the organization was. It's their mission statement.
I'll disagree. I think the group is sanctified. They're set apart. The rest of us are going to effing burn forever. But we can still see Kent Hovind. You know, he'll be there in hell, rotting with us, burning alive with us. But yeah, the point of them is to be sanctified and set apart and spared the ample suffering which is promised not only to non-believers, but also promised to that third of angels that the dragon sweeps away in Revelation. They're supposed to suffer, even though, let me read this to you. In Jude 1, verse 6, and the angels who did not keep their positions of authority but abandoned their proper dwelling, these he has kept in darkness bound with everlasting change for judgment on the great day. Now notice, this is saying these guys are already locked up, right? And so when the judgment happens, even though love keeps no record of right or wrong, there are these books that are mentioned in Revelation. One is the book that has all the people who get to, again, it's the OnlyFans page, like you hear me talk about. It's so all the people on the OnlyFans pages, they get to go ahead and enter into the joy. They get to go into heaven, have a lovely time and doing whatever, probably just worshiping God and, I don't know, golfing, I'm assuming. And there's probably really great coffee there. But the rest of us who are not in the Lamb's book of life, we're supposed to be judged for utter destruction. And it doesn't, and I got to find it. I'm pretty sure it's in Jeremiah where it talks about it doesn't matter what good you did. It doesn't matter all the wonderful things you did for other people. No, you're screwed. Now, I have been told, I have not read the Quran, but I was told by this man from Sri Lanka I had jury duty with, it's different in the Quran. He's saying that you are viewed by your actions. Your mouth, he says, is sealed. Someone else who's a Muslim told me they didn't know where this was. Like, where was this guy getting this? But your mouth is sealed. Your hands speak for what you've done in your life and whether or not you're worthy. Again, I don't know one way or another. I think these things are put in place to generate a better society. Not that there really is a heaven, but a better society, and a better, saying there is a heaven in that we all might be better people and sort of work to create that society on earth. And the feeling that people will have because they'll be so looked after and taken care of will be as if the presence of God were always among us because we're just so lovely to each other. I think probably initially that was part of the vision, and the person who thought that up should get a Nobel Priest Prize if they had him. But it didn't work out that way for a lot of people, because some people have psychological disorders and are bent on stepping on other people to get what they want. You know, you have all sorts of antisocial behaviors. So I think the initial goal of even Christianity is to, when it became a religion, is to improve society to some degree. I think sincerely, the first believers thought this was really true, thought it was really happening. There's something I had in Diodorus Siculus, I think it was. It's in my pictures.
All right, I'm going to keep playing rolling the tape.
Sure.
So this is not what leads you away from faith. This leads you to an informed faith. So if people who are Christian can still be Christian. Being Christian does not mean you believe in the Bible. Right. Being Christian means that you have this idea that there is a divine being in the world, and that Christ in some way manifests this divine being so you can understand God better or relate to God better. There are lots of different kinds of Christian. I left Christianity because I thought that I could no longer accept the idea of a powerful and loving God in charge of this world, given all of the horrible, horrible suffering in it. And I just got to a point, I didn't believe that there's a God who's active in any way at all in this world. So that's why I left Christianity. It had nothing to do with knowing that there was no rapture in the New Testament, or that the 666 is Nero, or that the enemy of Revelation is Rome. It's got nothing to do with any of that. That led me away from being a fundamentalist and moved me away from being an evangelical to being a liberal Christian. But liberal Christian scholars agree with most of this.
So in that question, sorry, I'm keeping you just a tad bit longer here, is that you're hitting something important to me, is like, as a liberal Christian, that meant you probably still accepted that Jesus rose for some reason. I know John Dominic Crossan doesn't. He thinks it's more of an allegory or something. But like, as you deconverted, did your perception of the resurrection also change? Because now you're like, okay, God, how could he allow all this evil, this suffering, this wicked stuff that we see around us, like children and cancer and you name it. Oh, the list can go on. After you came to that conclusion, did you then reevaluate the resurrection, or were you already, as a liberal Christian, because I know you had a slow transition there, start going, well, maybe this didn't literally happen, but I still believe in the faith? I mean, when did you change your view on the resurrection?
I changed it before I left Christianity. I believed that the resurrection spoke a very powerful message about how death is not the end of the story. And that it's the same, in some ways, it's the same message of Revelation. I think Revelation is a really, it's a very, it's a problematic book. I mean, there's a lot of evil that happens in Revelation that claims God is doing it, and I don't believe that. But the basic idea that at the end, good will triumph, and that that God, however you define God will win. That basic idea I held on to as a liberal Christian, but I didn't think that the resurrection literally physically happened. I thought it was a metaphor for the fact that good will triumph and that death is not the end of the story. When I stopped being a Christian for these other reasons, because of the issue of theodicy, about trying to explain the problem of suffering, when I left Christianity for that reason, then there was no longer.
Just want to harp on the fact that, again, even for a scholar, he got all the way to the resurrection. Doesn't have to be literal, just like me. Mm-mm. Just like me. He got all the way there and still was a Christian. But it was eventually moral issues. It was eventually, again, really challenging the character of the faith that was transformative for him. Go ahead.
Well, I guess Dodge just announced their new Dodge Demon 170. It's essentially a racing car for the street. You can buy it without a passenger seat. It doesn't have a rear seat anyway, but you can buy it without a passenger seat. It's still a car, even if it doesn't come with that seat. It's still a car. So just because Christianity is lacking something people need doesn't mean that it doesn't have a lot of things they do need or do want. And it still qualifies as what? Christianity. I think all of our viewers, including the Christian viewers, know absolutely no person that holds to 100% of all biblical doctrine. But Christianity talks about how we're supposed to honor that. I used that quote from my friend from elementary school earlier in the discussion he and I had, where he's saying, you're supposed to basically love people, right? Treat them the way that you want to be treated. And my reply is, God can't even do both those things. The God of the religion can't do it. So if the boss can't do it, at least he was smart enough to look for people who could. But Christians, I'd say by and large, do a fair amount of good work being lovely people. Now, when we look at politics on television in the world in general, or in this nation in general, we see some who don't, and they're getting a lot of press.
I don't think most of them. I don't think most of them are. I think most of them are deeply seated, and I really do believe that at the heart of it, most of them, even the Christians that we're friends and family with, the reason we don't really talk to them about this issue is because you'll see a side of them come out that's much harder to defend. And most of us don't want to come face to face with the ugliness of the people in our own lives. But to me, it is ugliness. And they're no different than a person who, knows that they know that they're in like a mob organization or a gang or something, and they know that, when it's time to really handle their business, they just use coded language, right? Oh no, when we were in that room, we said we just were going to pay so-and-so a visit, and we love them. And I actually said, bring them a basket of goodies, right? Now, when you went over there and you broke their leg, oh no, I didn't suggest you break their legs. I said, bring them a basket of goodies, right? I literally think that that's what they're doing. Like they were smart enough at somebody figured out, oh, you gotta make this sound nice. You gotta make it sound pro-social. And people have been buying into that poison pill ever since, and then they just use that as a deflection to not have to take the religion seriously. But all of them sit up there and they hear problematic ideas, and I don't know. I just think if you actually sat down with most of these Christians and really just and that to me speaks to it. Well, why are we sitting here applauding people who literally are in this grift that they're so attached to that that's abusive. They literally use it as a shield. Don't even challenge me. Don't tell me I'm wrong, because that would hurt me so badly that you're a bad person. I mean, it just reminds me of so many issues where we don't care what's really going on because we're so busy reinforcing the status quo. We're so busy speaking up and protecting the bullies that we don't see the issue for the people that are hurt. Like, even this week, like, we've been dealing with this whole Anna Kasparian thing. She's a popular leftist, progressive news commentator on TYT, the Young Turks, the huge audience. And she said, I'm a woman. Don't ever call me a quote unquote birthing person or a person with the uterus. And people were outraged. And I think rightfully so, because that language is only used to be inclusive, particularly of trans men. And here is a cis woman who this is never an issue for, being outraged that we're trying to create a world for other people.
Well, I listened to Anna. I listened to Anna talk about this sort of thing. I listened to Dusty talk about this sort of thing. Where I think she's coming from is that she's tired of the labels, like the endless labels. I don't think for 1 second she wants to take anyone's rights away or oppress anyone. I don't think it's a civil rights issue.
I don't either, but my point is that
I think it's exhaustion. I think it's just exhaustion from the endless labels that we
Sure, but where I'm going with this is the reason she got pushed back is because there's a marginalized group that needs to be taken into consideration.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the priority, not protecting the ego of the group that doesn't need protection because they're already the group with privilege. And with Christians, we don't have an honest conversation about what is going on with atheists, how hard it is to be an atheist, how atheists are second-class citizens, how atheists are living in the closet, how atheists have to deal with constantly virtue signaling about, oh, I want the person I vote for to be a Christian. I want my teacher to be a Christian. I want my doctor to be a Christian. Literally trying to create a world where atheists are not a part of this shit. And atheists are just constantly going, well, look, let's hang on now. Let's not go too hard at the Christians. Let's not make the Christians feel bad. Let's not make the Christians feel uncomfortable. Let's not tell the Christians that this shit isn't true. And I'm like, fuck that shit, man. I'm tired of it. I'm literally tired of it. The Christianity is a fucking toxic ass cult that abused me. Now, I need people in my life to stop making excuses for them. Let's listen to what Bart Ehrman has to say, man. Like, I'm frustrated right now.
Or even an issue. I mean, God can't raise Jesus from the dead if there's no God. And so that one's easy. But as a Christian still, and again, I know a lot of Christian people, scholars, who don't believe in a literal physical resurrection of Jesus. They don't think that happened. They don't believe in a virgin birth. They don't, that isn't what they think Christianity is all about. Many people say, well, you can't be a Christian if you don't believe in the Bible. Well, I deal with that in my book in a footnote, actually. I actually am dealing, sorry, now I'm taking your time, but, people tend to think that the book of Revelation, that everybody seems to think that it's predicting our future. Fundamentalists think it's predicting it correctly, and they know when it's going to happen or it's going to happen soon. But even the person on the street, the woman on the street, you ask her what Revelation's about, she says, well, it's predicting our future. Even though she's like, she's Jewish or something. I don't know. She's not, it's like what everybody thinks about the book of Revelation. It's predicting our future. And that view is modern. That view, the reason everybody has that view is because fundamentalists won on that point. Fundamentalists convinced everyone that Revelation is talking about our future, even though that was not the view of the church for 1,800 years. And so, but fundamentalists have now convinced everybody that that's what it's about. They're wrong about that. But the other thing they've convinced people about is they've convinced everybody that if you don't believe in the Bible, you can't be a Christian. That is just stupid. I mean, it's not even like bad theology. It's just stupid. I mean, how can you possibly say that you have to believe in the Bible to be a Christian? What about the people who were Christian before there was a Bible? You don't have our New Testament formulated.
All right.
This is crazy.
Fantastic.
Yeah, go ahead.
I immediately thought of, when he said this, of Serapis. Believers in Serapis are called Christians. So maybe it are called Christians. Okay. So those who worship Serapis are in fact Christians, and those who call themselves bishops of Christ are in fact devotees of Serapis. There is no chief of the Jewish synagogue, no Samaritan, no Christian presbyter who is not an astrologer, a soothsayer, or an anointer. So Serapis is hundreds of years before Jesus. So let me read to you from Diodorus Siculus. Osiris has been given the name Serapis by some, Dionysus by others, Pluto by others, Ammon by others, Zeus by some, and many have considered Pan to be the same god. And some say that Serapis is the god who the Greeks called Pluto. So, different kinds of Christians who didn't even know about a Jesus were still called Christians. Anyway, Serapis is spelled S-E-R.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I think people, they outthink themselves. Am I
outthinking myself?
No. I just think Bart Ehrman is. Look, this is why I'm not a philosophy guy. I just don't care about what's possible, right? I care about what's going on, and when we are dealing with religion in our country, we're dealing with a form of Christianity that does insist that it's biblical. So, sure, you can technically be a Christian without believing in the Bible. And I want to say something about that in a second, but I also don't think it's productive to sort of stick your nose up in the air and act like everybody's so twisted up, or confused about this idea that you have to believe in the Bible. I mean, of course, people know you don't have to really adhere to the Bible to consider yourself a Christian. I don't think that's legitimate criticism. We all ourselves probably did that, and we certainly know people who were that way. But at the end of the day, we're trying to deal with the influence of these religions in our world, and in large part, that's a lot of it is biblical. Like it's based on how people interpret and then want to live according to what's going on in the Bible. But I do think it's a real challenge, and I think for a lot of atheists, if you got to think about that seriously, because if a person is not adhering to the Bible, then it's going to be hard to use the Bible to convince them that there's a problem with their religion. But what's interesting about this is if you stick to what I think even Bart Ehrman would say is all you've got to have is some loose association of Jesus and some idea that, the gospel narrative, you've got something that's a lot more difficult to challenge, and I think it pushes you to a space where you then do want to consider deistic arguments, because if you don't even get a resurrection, if you don't even have to believe that there's a heaven or that there's an exclusive kingdom and all of this other stuff, then I think that is, at least for someone like Bart, it makes sense to why the problem of evil or problem of suffering, some of those more deistic things made him an atheist in terms of someone who didn't believe in a God, and then, or at least the all good, all loving type God. And then as a result of not believing in that God, he then no longer believed in Christianity. It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Well, a question I'll ask Christians is, why would you want to believe in a God who would send perfectly fine people who just happen not to be Christians to hell to suffer for eternity? What makes you want to be with someone like that? And often the answer consists of something that we've all probably already heard, that God does things for reasons sufficiently appropriate to God. Some will even be kind enough to be honest with us and say, I don't want to go to hell. I don't want to suffer eternal conscious torment.
Right.
To me, that's the best answer. A better thing for that person, in my point of view, the better thing for that person to do is realize God would be immoral.
Right, if that was even possible.
To make anyone suffer forever.
Right.
I encourage people to read Plato's Phaedo. That's Phaedo. Socrates talks about how the underworld works, and how when you die, your soul goes into these rivers, and then there's this lake that is fire and suffering. And essentially, if I'm simplifying what he said, the souls are basically calling out to the people that the souls of the people that need to forgive them. And when you are forgiven, you are brought out, you can come out of this lake of fire and your suffering ceases. That is 1,000 times more beautiful than anything Revelation is laying down for you. The fact that the process is up to us. If that was the story that got around, if that was the story that was predominantly believed, we might as well forgive each other now. Because if we go into the next life, afterlife,
right,
knowing we're going to suffer for what we've done, and that the only way to get out of it is for the people who we caused pain to forgive us, you start asking now. I think Christianity gives you sort of the faint shadow of that. You're supposed to come clean, right? Confess your sins to one another daily. It sort of does that. But it's also kind of, I don't know, either I'm giving Socrates too much weight and the Bible not enough weight, which is possible. So let's just put them on equal footing. There's a reason why this world's going to hell. Yeah, let's put them on equal footing. I just don't think it's something that's practiced enough. And again, Robert Price said Christians don't like the Bible they've got. That stays in my mind as I read through it, and Christians get challenged on their beliefs, only not to really want to hold to their beliefs. Anyway, that's my spiel.
All right, let's wrap this thing on up.
Kind of finalized until the 4th, 5th century. And so like everybody before that wasn't a Christian because they didn't believe in the Bible. And where does Jesus go around saying that, if you want eternal life, believe in the Bible? You don't find that anywhere in the Bible. And look at the Nicene Creed, the creed that formed the basis of Christian faith for centuries and centuries. We believe in God Almighty, God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. And, it goes on and gives the things you have to believe to be a faithful Christian. It doesn't mention the Bible. And so why do you think believing the Bible is it? Because the fundamentalists told you that. The fundamentalists said, if you don't believe in the Bible, you can't be a Christian.
I don't know.
And everybody said, oh, really? Oh, God, I guess I'm not a Christian then because I believe in evolution. But liberal Christians, like smart theologians, are saying, what are you talking about? Believing the Bible is not what Christianity is. Christianity is about believing in Jesus. It's in some way. It's not about believing the Bible. And so, but anyway, especially here in the South, people just say, well, you can't be a Christian if you don't believe in the Bible. So, where are you getting this from? Anyway, sorry, that was my little soapbox.
I loved it. That was such a good soapbox. Bart, me and you, we know that there's a rapture happening sometime soon. So we want people to make sure they sign up for this lecture, because if they don't go, what will happen to them is going to be...
They'll be left behind.
Yeah. And you know what happens to people who get left behind?
Ooh, it's bad. Whew. Very bad. Very, very bad. So you don't want to be left behind.
You really don't, Bart. I'm excited about this lecture. I always enjoy learning from you. All of your courses, of course, they can go to your website and check them out. This one is going to be amazing. It's going to be live. We can go check it out. Thank you for giving us your time today and teaching us a little bit about Revelation. We got a real deep sneak peek. Get the book. Sign up for the course. Any final words from you?
Going on,
no, but except also go to my blog, the Bart Ehrman blog. I talk about this stuff all the time, 5 times a week.
Back to promoting his blog
post going back 10 years, and I raise money doing it for charity. So why not?
Thank you, Bart.
Somebody was just talking about how he hadn't been doing that, but I guess he's back to doing it. All right, folks, let me get out of here so I can check in with my meeting. Go ahead, my one black friend. I'll let you wrap us up.
Oh, no, Bart Ehrman does have a charity where he donates money to feed people. So that's admirable. That's something I do. I don't have a charity, but I donate money to feed people, and I never get to see them eat the food, but it's just good to know, like, okay, this family has a meal. And I was in a poor family growing up, and those groceries used to show up at our house or our apartment and feed us. So how could I say no to the opportunity to do that for others when generally it's fairly easy to do?
Yeah,
that's all I got.
All right, gang. Well, I appreciate you. Thanks so much, my one black friend.
Thank you.
Really interesting. I'd love to get maybe Dr. Ehrman on at some point. But yeah, so glad to see everybody. Thank you so much for showing up. We are in the Bundy Ranch in Gather. The link is pinned in the chat. It's also down in the description. Please come join us and hang out. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Later
Take
on,
care
everybody.
of yourself. Take care of yourself.
And each other. We did it. Poof.